Today, we are going to Germany, so sit back as we go to the early 20th century. Grete Beier was born on September the 15th, 1885, in Brand-Erbisdorf, which is a small town in the German Free State of Saxony. She was always known by her family and friends as Grete. Her father held the prominent and respected position of mayor of the town, which meant that his daughter enjoyed a very good lifestyle. She was educated in the best schools and surrounded herself with the town's wealthy families. She always dressed in fine clothes and made sure she was seen in the most fashionable places. Grete grew up to be a very beautiful lady, and she was very sought after by many of the young men from some of the region's most affluent and influential families. Her parents had not been born into high society. Her father had worked as a coal miner before obtaining a position in the local bank, where he eventually became the manager, and her mother was the daughter of a shoemaker. So now her father held the prestigious position of mayor. Grete's parents were very keen to make sure that their daughter would enhance her social standing even more by marrying into the right family. And when Grete turned 22, they encouraged her to accept the marriage proposal of a successful engineer named Kurt Pressler. He was everything the parents wanted for their daughter: well respected, very rich, and a person who was associated with the highest social circle. He was also infatuated with their daughter. She accepted his marriage proposal. There were, however, two quite large drawbacks with Grete accepting the marriage proposal. The first was that her new fiancé was already married, albeit separated from his wife. He explained that he had already petitioned for a divorce, and once all the legal matters were resolved, they could marry. This arrangement suited Grete. As a second drawback was that, unbeknown to her parents or her new fiancé, she was already secretly engaged to a man named Hans Merker. Hans worked as a clerk. He did not come from a wealthy family and didn't really have any money, but Grete loved him and had no intention of ending their relationship. But she also did not want to give up on her great opportunity of becoming the wife of a very rich and influential man who could give her the things in life she had always sought. In April 1907, Grete's uncle died. He was the officer in charge of a poorhouse. In his will, he bequeathed a large amount of his estate to Grete. This was not a fortune, but a tidy sum for a young lady. The thing that no one was aware of was that Grete had falsified her uncle's will, and together with her boyfriend Hans, could now start to live a more comfortable life. The problem that Grete faced was that she had become engaged to Kurt, and his affections for her were somewhat unwanted. He would write her letters and send her gifts, and in order to be closer to her, he rented an apartment in the nearby city of Chemnitz. He rented the apartment as he thought it would be easier for her to visit him. Grete wanted the lifestyle that his wealth could bring, but she wanted to be with Hans, who was never going to advance himself into the high society circles that she and her parents had worked so hard to be accepted in. He was also never going to be accepted by her father as a future husband. Grete needed to find a way where she would be able to stay with Hans, but still have the benefits of being with her wealthy fiancé. But with every day that passed was a day nearer to her becoming his wife. He had already set a date for the wedding and had already bought the rings. Grete was getting desperate. On May the 13th, 1907, she left her house and made her way by train to Chemnitz and to Kurt's apartment. He was very happy to see her and was very much looking forward to spending the evening with her. But Grete had other ideas. She had no intention of spending the night with her fiancé. She had planned something very different for him. Soon after arriving, and after the couple's usual exchange of sweet talk, Grete prepared her fiancé a drink, but the drink was different to any she had ever prepared for him before. This time she took out a bottle of cyanide that he kept in his desk drawer and poured some of it into a glass before handing it to him. He quickly drank it and suddenly sunk into his chair. Grete then moved slowly towards him, took out a revolver and shot him. The noise of the revolver was drowned out by the sound of the nearby church bells. The plan was well thought out, and after shooting her fiancé, she coolly then sat at his desk and wrote love letters between Kurt and a fictional Italian woman. The letters threatened to expose an affair he was having with the Italian lady. Grete also forged a suicide note, stating that the Italian lady was going to expose him and he could not take all the shame. He wrote that he was leaving all of his money to the true love in his life, his fiancée, Grete. After finishing writing the letters and the note, she calmly placed a revolver beside him and left. She walked briskly to the train station and caught the train to Freiburg. It was a Monday and the train was busy. She looked at the people and thought to herself that no one on the train would suspect but the finely dressed, pretty young lady had just murdered her fiancé. After arriving in Freiburg, she went to a society gathering where the charming mayor's daughter laughed, ate and drank with her friends while thinking about the dark secret she was hiding. A couple of hours after Grete had left the apartment, Kurt's brother arrived and was horrified when he found Kurt lying dead with a revolver by his side and a suicide note next to him. He looked at the note and concluded that it had undoubtedly been written by his brother. In this letter, Kurt had begged his brother to forgive him for his action and asked him to comfort his future bride. He contacted the police, who came and examined the scene. After completing their investigation, they concluded that this was a case of suicide. Although his brother understood that Grete had been named a benefactor of the entire estate, he was baffled as to why he would leave all of his money to a girl he had only known for a short while, and who, without the will, would have no legal claim to any of his possessions. He decided to take the will and the suicide notes to be examined by handwriting experts. The experts' conclusion was that the will and the note were not written by Kurt and had almost definitely been false. Kurt's brother took all of his findings to the police, who decided to open an investigation. Grete was immediately included as a suspect, and the police were already looking into irregularities of her uncle's will. They watched her for a few weeks, and when they discovered a letter to Hans which suggested she committed the crime of forging her uncle's will, they decided that they had enough evidence to make an arrest. Grete, her mother and Hans were all arrested on the charges of forging a will. They were all taken to the police station. After her arrest, the police started to question Grete both about her uncle's will and also about the death of her fiancé. Under intense police questioning, the young lady decided to confess her crimes. She was told that in Saxony, all murders were eventually pardoned, and that the last person to be executed was more than 50 years before, in 1852, so Grete signed a written confession. The police also charged Grete's mother and Hans in the crime of forging her uncle's will. The trial of Grete Beier began on June the 29th, 1908, in the District Court of Freiburg. There was massive public interest in the case from both the press and the public, and over 1,000 people arrived to try and get into the courthouse. The press filled their papers with the story, the mayor's daughter in the love triangle. Her father was spared seeing his daughter arrested and the media circus that surrounded her trial, as he had died in August of 1907. The trial lasted for 2 days, and in all 16 witnesses were called upon to give evidence. She was being tried for theft, forgery, and murder. The evidence against her was very conclusive, and she had also written a confession in an attempt to get the sentence reduced. It came as no surprise when the 12 jurors returned a verdict of guilty on all charges. The judge then sentenced her to be executed. The jury, however, unanimously supported the defendant's pardon request, which would mean that the sentence would be reduced to life in prison. The request was then heard by the King of Saxony, who decided that Grete's crimes were all premeditated and refused to commute her sentence. The execution date was set for July the 23rd, 1908, in the courtyard of the Freiburg prison. Grete's mother, in a separate trial, was sentenced to 2 years in prison for embezzlement. On July the 21st, the authorities let mother and daughter spend some time together and say their last goodbyes. At 6:30 in the morning, on July the 23rd, 1908, Grete calmly walked into the prison courtyard to have her sentence carried out. Before placing her head in a guillotine, she was asked if she had any last words, and she said, "Father, in your hands I command my spirit." The body of Grete Beier was taken to Dresden in a coffin decorated with flowers. There she was buried the next day in a family grave next to her father. When her mother eventually died, she was buried in the same grave. Grete's fiancé, Hans Merker, was sentenced to 20 months in prison for embezzlement, and sometime after his release, he started a new life in Argentina. Hello everyone, and thank you so much for listening. As per usual, please leave any comments or feedback you may have, and I will see you in the next brief case.